social media platforms for Generation Africa, for Steps, for AfriDocs, and for all of our colleagues who are in this live chat. This is part of a series of conversations unpacking the thematics of the films of Generation Africa. And today we're focusing on the film African Moot, directed by Shamila Sidat, co-produced by Steps in South Africa, Undercurrent Television and Film in South Africa, and Tufi Films in Finland, and part of the Generation Africa collection, which we are releasing over the next weeks on AfriDocs. This film has done incredibly at festivals across the world, and it's also broadcast at it's been shared with several broadcasters where it's had an amazing response. So we're really happy for it to have a homecoming and to celebrate its launch on AfriDocs. We are privileged to have a facilitator, moderator for the conversation with the characters or participants of the film African Moot, and the director of African Moot. And our moderator is Matiko Mborera Nyamazi, who is based at the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. And she shortens her name Mati. She's from Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, and she is a graduate of BA Law at UP, as well as an LLB from the University of South Africa. And her academic interest is in human rights and international law and cybersecurity. And she's the best qualified person to have this conversation because she also works on the Moot competitions, which are organized out of the University of Pretoria. Mighty, welcome, and thank you for hosting this conversation for AfriDocs. So I'll just invite you to introduce the conversation and introduce your panel.
Tiny, and good evening to everyone. An exciting conversation to have indeed. Beyond honored to facilitate this conversation. And my name is Mati Komborera. Definitely go by Mati as facilitating our conversation. With a very important and special movie, I have a lawyer and human rights enthusiast. It's one of our protagonists in this film, Muyenga, who is attorney at the Legal Resources Center, holds a Bachelor of Laws and a Master's of Town. Muyenga submitted his LLM on the enjoyment of the right to freedom, LGBT non-governmental organization. And whilst completing his LLM, assistant in the Department of Public, where he taught international law and constitution, has also worked as an associate editor of the Human Rights. He's passionate about litigation and has a particular environmental law and equality. He's based in Cape Town. Also have the diary briefly introduced by Tiny, Shamila, before turning to filmmaking, law and policy, including South Africa's UNIFEM, UNDP, and democracy. Her first feature-length to power about the loss of South Africa's first female public protect film festivals and won multiple awards. 22 feature film Best African Documentary at the and has screened very IDFA, Doc NYC, Hot Fest Munich, Durban International Film Festival, Filmmakers Festival in Account, and has also directed several programs and civil society organizations on Law and Social Justice Journal. I welcome our guest this evening, and thank you for joining me, everyone. I hope that you're
Thank you.
you all.
Hello.
All right. I take it that you know, just to kickstart our conversation, to start from the beginning, because the beginning is always so. So I just want to make for our audiences as well, in the legal framework, a very foreign and strange, and so it then begs the question: did you come about telling a continental story as of young people of Africa, but specifically difficult to understand?
Hi. Hello, everybody. I I think we're having I think we're having a bit of a sound issue, so I couldn't get your question completely. Do you mind repeating the last bit?
No, no problem, no problem. You know, if this is better by a thumbs up. I haven't. Can anyone who can hear me? Okay, I'm going to just shoot that question again. Audio is getting better. So I was just explaining that not widely known, and they're not known outside the circle. So I just wanted to start off on Shamila. How did you, using something that is not easy to explain, linguistic, use it to tell such a
Okay. Thanks for that. I think I got the gist of your question. Can everybody else hear me on the panel, or can you not hear me either? Okay.
I can.
Okay. Okay, so let me try. Well, first of all, I'd like to say hello to everybody joining us. And I'm particularly delighted today because we have two participants in the Moot, two incredible participants who were very brave to take, not just to take part in the Moot competition, which is an experience, as I've witnessed, filled with nerves. And, you know, it's a big deal to stand up there and present your argument and then be fired on by a panel of judges. Not just that, but also participate in a film and allow a film team to capture them in the moment as they go through the competition, and also to show their vulnerabilities and to, yeah, just to watch them moot and compete and all the emotions that come along with that. So firstly, thank you to Muyanga and to Daniela. And then I must say thank you also to the other characters who participated in the Moot who are not part of this conversation. Bear with me while I just name them. There's Amor and Rachel from Kenya. There's Daniela's teammate from Makerere University. Sorry, Amor and Rachel from University of Nairobi. And Daniela and Jerome. Jerome's not here. Daniela's teammate from Makerere. There's also Taufik, who was Muyenga's teammate from UCT. And then also our team from University of Cairo, Karim and Anouk, and several other participants that we followed over time. A special shout out to Emma and Pierre from Ivory Coast and numerous others. So yes, moot competitions. I think all of us in the world of law know them quite well or get to know them. And I'll speak specifically about myself. Once upon a long time ago, I was a law student myself. So I got to know this competition. I got to know about mooting. I was never brave enough to do any proper moot, but just a class moot. And I didn't think it was for me. But I kind of followed this world of mooting, and I came across this very interesting moot. So moots have become popular and they happen all over the world, and there's some very specialized and very big international ones. But this one, the African Human Rights Moot Competition, or the All Africa Moot, stood out for me because it had a continental focus. I looked at moots these moot competitions because they've been happening on the African continent since 1992, so it's, I think, 30 years of this competition, started by the University of Pretoria, the Center for Human Rights, happening every year in a different African capital on the continent. And I thought, what an amazing competition to happen in a different country, and involve youth of the continent who are very passionate about using the law. And we know the law can be used for good and the law can be used for bad. So I thought, what a great world to find young people on the African continent in, with their lives still ahead of them, with ideas and thoughts that they might want to share, very passionate about making legal arguments. And I thought, this is a challenge. How do we tell a story about mooters, about mooting, and and just capture all the emotions, but also the real serious issues that the hypothetical case actually deals with. So that was my entry point into making a film about the mooting. And yes, there were lots of challenges in trying to make something that can be quite technical in terms of the law come alive. But I think it's very much through uh, Daniela and Muyanga and the other characters that we really experience the world of the moot, what it means to participants, and also what lingering impact it can have, or what conversations that take place at the moot, and honing legal skills, sort of what role that plays, either in a young mooter's life or at that current time or into the future. Marty, I'll leave it there because couldn't quite hear your question. But if anybody else wants to speak about the same topic, please do.
Thank you so much, Shamita, for sharing. Very, very insightful and beautiful. Thumbs up that you can hear me, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? No? I'll try and be slow and maybe we can get. I just wanted to, said about her experience being, afraid, having the guts to moot. Pick up on Daniela's story. Since in the beginning of the moot, and had the opportunity to watch it. If you're not nervous, then there's so could you just talk us through your journeying through those nerves shared with the entire world, moving into your career, and how them helped you journey through that?
Okay, good question. Thank you. Um, yes, I remember saying that it was really part of the human experience to be nervous about something like that. And especially it being a new topic, it being a new area of experience, speaking before really intelligent people, also being questioned while you are presenting your ideas can be quite intimidating. And I think it got worse when we went to Botswana because it was, and I remember I mentioned it, that it was the best minds from the continent and so many smart people and so many people with like new ideas and better arguments, and there were so many questions spanning the whole continent. So it was really, really nerve-wracking, but I think it taught me how to work through the nerves, especially coming from the point of preparing for the question. So I found that when I prepared, I became more confident and I knew what to anticipate. But also, even when the preparation wasn't sufficient, I was able to just think on my feet. Those are things that we learned as we went along and as we advanced in the competition. You learn to think on your feet, you learn to be creative around arguments. and sometimes you make arguments that are quite difficult to stomach, especially uh, that are, for example, if you were arguing on the respondent side and then you were pro-government and the abusers of the, you were arguing for the abuser of the human rights and you were trying to defend them, it was quite difficult to stomach. But you become creative around it. Also, you learn to be more confident as you are on the podium. So in the first few minutes, your voice is shaky and you feel your knees are giving way. But as you stay there and as you tackle question by question, then you are able to proceed with it. And right after the experience of mooting, even right into my work and other schoolwork, I've been able to walk through the discomfort of being nervous, just to keep going and keep trying and keep trying. And I think in the end, that's what builds confidence. So it never really goes away to be nervous. You just learn to do things, you learn to do difficult things while you're scared. So I think that's a really important thing to know as an adult. And I'm realizing that the need for it never goes away. Yes. I hope that answers your question.
Cool. Um, I remember during the documentary, I mentioned that mooting, litigating, standing in front of judges and presenting wasn't something um, that I saw myself doing in the long term, or perhaps even in the short term. I didn't see myself doing it because it's always something that has been scary and a little bit intimidating for me. Um, but I really think that the Moot was an extremely valuable experience, and has played a big role in where I am now. So I'm working as a candidate attorney in Cape Town, South Africa at the moment. And although I do very rarely have to present in front of judges, I think that what I've learned from the Moot is the value in preparation, especially for skills which you feel less comfortable about, or perhaps for topics or areas of the law which you feel less confident about. There's definitely value in still being able to prepare well, to to put your best foot forward, to do whatever you're doing with confidence. And mooting wasn't something that I had much experience in before going to Botswana, which was actually, I guess, another interesting um, part of the experience of being there, just like the different um, cultures that each university's had around mooting. So mooting wasn't something that I felt very comfortable with heading to Botswana, but I think that what I definitely can take from it is the fact that lots of scary, intimidating things are going to come across your path in life. And that's definitely been my experience in my new job, where we're learning all of these new things. And it's given me the confidence to make me feel as though the capacity that I have to do things is much greater than what I think and what my doubts might be telling me.
Being to
Do I go next, Mati?
Yeah, I think it's you,
Okay.
Daniela.
So the question that I'm supposed to answer for the benefit of the audience is, working in the law, how do I think issues of displaced persons and migration within the continent can be better addressed by the youth? I think that any conversation and anything as important as migrant rights and refugee rights deserve relevance in public spaces, deserve relevance in public conversations and dialogue. And I think that's one thing that our generation really excels at, is keeping the important things in the conversation. So I think that we should, especially as we're getting into the workspaces and as we're getting into our different roles, some people are getting into politics and others are just in a private practice and others are in advocacy and human rights work. I think the best thing to do for migrant rights and for the situation of refugees and migrants all over the continent is just to, one, keep the conversation going, but also keep it going in a progressive way, in a way that ensures that there's protection of human rights for refugees, and also ensures that there are progressive voices for their protection and recognition and for their for humanitarian aid even. So I think that's what young people should do better and should continue doing, to continue to advocate, even in the different, even if you're not in the human rights space. For example, I'm in a corporate space, but there's so many areas that I could be contributing, writing, speaking about it, um, and advocating in such, even teaching it in schools and wherever.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You bring up a very important point, that we exist and can be used as them. And Muyenga, I just want something that you mentioned in the film. You mentioned in the film that you hadn't realized how the story is. And I feel is also engaging with the film. The statement stayed in the conference. How hard did you work to be born? And it's not a given that we will or stateless persons. And I just want to find out what your thoughts are around activism or bringing awareness and in the narrative that people who are coming from a ward are unfit for the. If you could just explore that vein towards migration.
Thanks, Mati. I'm not sure if I fully grasped what the question was. If you could summarize that quickly again for the benefit of me and maybe the viewers.
No, basically you touch on how within the case, Hitler realized this as you were arguing and researching, and I just wanted to know your thoughts around the youths in Africa to understand the nature of being stateless or the nature of being a displaced person is not from the next person. Ways can we bring these issues to light as well as ourselves? I will type that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe,
Maybe.
the benefit of the audience, maybe I should just speak a little bit about the question of refugees and migration and why it's important that it's considered by Daniela and Muyenga and other young people on the continent. And then maybe we'll, if that's okay, Marty? Okay. So, I mean, I think what's also important about this particular moot is that the hypothetical question that Daniela and Muyenga and the students had to consider was one around migration across the African continent itself. So, I mean, if you watch mainstream media images, you'd see that it looks as if the bulk of migration is happening from Africa through the Mediterranean and to European countries. And there's sort of these images that perpetuate this idea that these countries far away are being burdened by a huge flow of struggling Africans going to take resources from other places. But the reality is that over 80% of movement on the African continent is intercontinental. It's happening within the continent and happens across land. And this moot, the older generation of lawyers and younger generation of lawyers participating in the moot, felt that they would come together and discuss movement as it affects each other on the continent, rather than to focus the agenda on movement away from the continent. Because as we know, that conversation has different implications and that conversation is about movement outside the continent. And you'll see in policy discussions, there's a lot of talk about securitizing the Sahel, for important, and that is something that is away from our continent. Yet we have the situation where there are refugee emergencies that have been happening for a long time on this continent. There's movement that has been happening and migration for millennia. And countries on this continent have found ways to deal with it. And there are many deficiencies and there are many strengths. And you'll find a country like where Daniela comes from, Uganda, which is hailed as having a very open policy towards migration, even though it is a less resourced country. So there are a lot of interesting issues that come up just by virtue of having this discussion amongst young students. And I think I'll leave it for there and for Muyenga to take off with more about refugee issues and how you experience them at the competition itself.
So the benefit for the benefit of the viewers. I've been asked to discuss how we can, how the African youth, our generation, how can we draw awareness to the fact that an event which causes us to be refugees can happen at any moment and in any place, for example. And I do think it's a really interesting question, because I think a lot of the time, perhaps it's human nature to have this sense of complacency, or I guess a false sense of security, that bad events, bad luck, which may fall upon others, will never fall on us, because of whatever reason. I do think that perhaps with the increase of technology and the fact that it's just so much easier to hear narratives, stories, opinions, experiences of people from not only around the continent but around the world, people who are affected by these incidents should really be given the platform to just speak about the human side of it, the fact that perhaps they, like how they lost their house, how the school that they attended has been destroyed, just to really personalize these experiences, to make people think about, for example, the school that they went to, what it would feel like if they were gone, and it would just, or if the school were gone, and it would just help in demystifying these kind of unpredictable, violent, like seismic, life-changing events, and to make one think that, we have this and this and this and this in common, but at the end of the day, this war broke out in that part of the country. Is it possible that something similar might befall on me in the future? And I think it's a very important question to be asking ourselves. And I think that if we ask that question more often and considered it more seriously, then especially on the part of politicians, there would be more awareness and more sympathy towards people being forcibly displaced from their homes.
Can
I? Daniela, to also just bring up.
Okay, I started hearing at the end of his point, but I resonate with exactly what he said. The fact, the question of making it a human question and a human issue, and if people are allowed to tell their stories and the people who are mostly affected, then it counters the politicization of the whole refugee crisis and the whole migration crisis, because nobody leaves their home willingly. Everybody that has to get on a ship, everybody that has to cross a border in the middle of the night would not choose to be in that situation. So I think if we looked at it from that angle, as opposed to the politics of it, and as opposed to being nationalistic and closed off, and just being more open, because like Muyenga said, it could be anyone, and it could, you cannot, for example, this year started and Ukrainians did not think that they would be fleeing their country to go somewhere else, right? And everybody, I remember the shock in the news about it happening in Europe, and oh, this doesn't really usually happen in our neighborhood, and it can happen to anyone, it can happen any day, and it's still going on, right? So for it to be a politicized question is really dehumanizing to people that have had their whole lives as they've known them taken away from them very suddenly, very violently. Very people who rarely have an option in having to move. So I think if we are to handle that question in a more human way, then that's the only way. That's the only lens in which we should look at it, to counter the politics, and not paint them as enemies, as those people who are coming into our country, them versus us, and which can be really divisive, and also which can create more vulnerability to people who have already suffered so much loss.
Yes, definitely. Can't begin to express how both Yenga and Daniela, and just because forever, although we would love to close up our discussion with words of encouragement. I'll start first, Yenga, and then Daniela, and we'll close off with Shan. You to speak to other lawyers who possibly to raise the mantle of act issues, especially when the news stops talking about, then it becomes non-existent. So how we can really just these issues that are happening on a daily basis.
So I think that the Moot is a really good, I don't know, it hones skills that are really important for activism. It hones skills such as understanding where the other side is coming on, and also coming from, rather, but also the nuances that apply in arguments, and the fact that a number, like the same materials, the same laws can be used to justify a whole range of different positions. I think as an activist, it really shows you that the malleability of the law, and the fact that we need to have this kind of like legal imagination, use the law very creatively to advocate for the issues that we very firmly believe in. We shouldn't be discouraged by opening a law textbook and seeing a certain interpretation being pushed and think that's the end of the matter. This client, this community, this country, this group of people can't be helped. I think it really helped in terms of that creativity. And it's given me a lot of, optimism, seeing all of the great minds. I don't think that I spoke to Daniela much when I was in
No.
Botswana. I think I found her a little bit intimidating, to be honest. But they were very, very impressive people from all over the continent there. And if we all had take the same lesson about the creative use of the law from that mood, I really think we can all make a difference wherever we find ourselves. Yeah. Thanks, Matty.
Okay, a really good question. Um, I'll start with my experience, right? At my university, we had a program that was called Clinical Legal Education, and in it, Moot was used as a module, one of which were even graded upon. And most of the moots that we did were on human rights questions. And after doing those moots, we were assigned to either work on a case, on a research project, or to do an internship in an organization that advocated for the question on which you were mooting on. And it really, really gave us a a mindset shift, right? Because when we went into law school, everybody was more, I'm going to get into a law firm and do private practice and do corporate practice, right? But we got to really understand these human rights principles, and we got to really internalize them and to appreciate them and even appreciate the activism work. And we even took it a step further to make it practical. So we would work with organizations in the Ugandan case, where we would take cases to the actual constitutional court that was strategic in expanding the reach of human rights or protecting. So, for example, I worked on issues to do with maternal health and sexual reproductive health and rights. And it's all because of a background in Moot that I was able to appreciate these questions, and I was able to research and read beyond the scope of my classwork. So it creates law students and lawyers in practice who are human rights sensitive, people who, even in any area that they eventually end up in, who are able to have that mindset and have that lens in everything that they do. So it creates a small change little by little, and I think it's really, really important.
Thank you for that, Shamina. Make a
Yes,
contribution.
yes. Well, thank you, Martin. Thank you so much for a lovely conversation, and also to Muyanga and Daniela. And you can see why speaking in the same session as them is a very difficult challenge. um, they choose their words beautifully and with a lot of heart. So maybe I'll just say about some of the reflections that people have had after watching African Moot that struck me, and it was directly about the characters themselves. After one of the screenings, a person from the African continent said, "You know what? I want to be friends with all the Mooters." And then somebody else, an older person, well, a person similar to my age, said, "You know what? I think the kids are going to be all right." So for me, when people watch this film, it's clear that they feel very inspired by the passion and dedication and also the skill and hard work of young people on the continent. And I think there's a lot, there's a lot here to take forward, just from this conversation, and just also just sort of the ethos and the spirit of young people on the continent who are keen to work hard and to help each other.
No, definitely, it's in the hands of the youth. And joining me in this conversation, sharing that within your own spaces, this and that beyond this, we have more and both move sport competitions, but also that I also just want to encourage everyone, firstly, to thank them, but to film if they haven't. It is available at afridocs.net on the social media page, able to find links to not only the films that are under Generation Africa, but also rise up in your act. Everyone, I want to say thank you, and
Thank you.
our audience, and I hope you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.